You know, I really hate making videos like this that are like so and so tweeted about. So let's make a video exactly about how Greg Street tweeted about the Riot MMO. Just a little bit of a news update, I suppose. It kind of went on a long thread this time, and normally I'm not going to do this, but I think there's enough substance here that I want to talk about it and just kind of like give you some thoughts as to why did they even announce the MMO in the first place. So I'll link down to the thread below, but he says like one of the most common questions that we get is the MMO. Why was it announced in such a weird way? And it really comes down to this was a strategy. The CEO thought it was a good idea to, low-key announce it just so they can acquire some help to develop it, because an MMO is a massive project upbringing, so it takes a lot of resources in order to make an MMO. So if you tell everyone in the world that you're making an MMO and you happen to be Riot Games, maybe everyone in the world will want to work for you and work on your MMO. So that's kind of like why they did it. We need lots of MMO bets. We need excited players, and we wanted to announce it so it doesn't get leaked anyway. So often it is in business, you worry about sometimes who's scoping you, but that's harder to claim with an MMO. Everyone more or less knows how to make one. Everyone knows how to make an MMO. But the challenge is actually in doing so, and that's the massive cost and the time it takes, something I reiterated just a little bit ago. The other thing that happens when announcing it early is sustaining the momentum. It is hard to keep players engaged and excited for years. They might get impatient, they might get trickled with information, which is worse. They might have expectations, interpret the normal rate of development, and something can go wrong. This was announced, 2 years ago? And we're probably years away from it. So it's going to be hard to keep up the momentum. Riot is trying to mitigate that, even though this was part of their strategy. Since usually you don't hear about games so early, games are often announced until they come out and with like a feature set, some representation art, or even a cinematic. And other consideration is usually framed as a protection to the team. You need to be ability to pivot your direction, and sometimes massively, in response to internal testing and external market forces. Sorry about my stuttering there. However, this is basically saying, hey, something went wrong. We can't pull this off. We need to pivot these assets and use them somewhere else. And it also protects the team, like, hey, you're working on the MMO. Please give me all of your insider information about it. Please, I beg you, I'm some random Timmy on the internet. Timmy, no! So that's kind of like an idea to it. When developers are under pressure because they know players are so eager, they can make it harder to toss out designs that they aren't working. Games are hard enough to make when your game is so secret and under wraps, let alone when the big white light is shining down on you. So essentially they're saying, you put the spotlight on us, you're putting pressure on us that's not needed, and maybe we'll make faulty decisions based off of the knowledge that people are pressuring us with. So just a little bit of insight there. So the reasons we announce these kind of low-key kind of way is that we want to predominantly reach actual fans but not go too mainstream. Now I'm not pretending that we're all kind of in on a secret together, but they just kind of want to see what interest there is. Hey, it's better than hey, you're making an MMO rather than having a giant cinematic, the League MMO, best MMO of all time, and then you have to live up to those expectations. Because if no one wanted a League MMO, they could just be like, you know what, our assets are better used somewhere else. So it's better and easier for the mainstream media to ignore ramblings of a few developers and then constantly bargaining for screenshots and feature announcements. Media needs eyeballs for articles. I'm sure everyone is fully aware of this. So any headline is a good headline, whether it is true or not. They're just looking for clicks. So when we start to actually release information such as features, story, looks at art, shifts to going on to more real and fruition, it's also going to be harder to undo those features. change the story and update the art. So if this is the art style they want after they released an image, it's harder to bring it back later. So like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes is a great example of that if you know anything about those games. So just kind of like some insight there. Players and media may interpret these things as something must be wrong, because if they aren't seeing changes, which are very normal in the public, we're doing big announcements and big questions when we have more confidence in the direction that we will stick. We don't need 100% confidence, but we need to have more than we have today, which I think is a very like insightful thing on the development, because people automatically assume it's going to take 7 years to make your game. It is like everything's going wrong. There's nothing going wrong with the game, or everything's going wrong with development. There's something wrong internally at Riot, yada, yada, yada. You hear this for all sorts of articles about development hell and this game's never coming out. And Riot's like trying to avoid all of that. So one of the challenges of the MMO, and like maybe even the most important challenge, is that all these systems have to work together and like function. One bad feature can topple the whole experience. You know, your dungeons can look beautiful, but if your combat's mediocre, the dungeon's gonna suck. So basically, we need to make a game that is fun and the whole experience is good, because like it's a domino effect. One bad thing, you can have the most beautiful game in the world, but if it's a bad like functioning game, it's just not going to be fun to play and no one's going to play it. So we do still vow to talk early and often. There isn't going to be an E3 type of hype deal. The game is mostly done before you see it, and we'll keep having to say, sorry, it's too late to change anything. So, you know, that's what we're going to get. We want the ability to make massive pivots if the feedback isn't what we're wanting to hear. That even means delaying the game. It's worth it to make sure the game exceeds your expectations, which you are ready and pretty lofty as they are. So he's just saying, hey, we're not going to do any of these things so that, you know, if we have to pivot the game, we can actually make the best game possible. I have a lot of empathy for you. He's talking about people who are following him and following this game. We want to talk about the game more. We're very proud of it, and we think it's going to be something truly special. But we know it's not that time. We appreciate your patience and even your impatience. He knows everyone is just dying for tidbits of anything. So he's just trying to like temper your expectations. I'm a huge believer in communication to the players, which is why I'm kind of making this video. He wants to communicate with people. He wants people to understand like where he's coming from. He's a first-time developer, but he doesn't want people to feel like they're in the dark. It doesn't mean that he's going to take your feedback or Riot's going to take your feedback, but they certainly want you to be part of the conversation. So even if a feature isn't working, you'll have an understanding of what our end goal is, and we'll direct your feedback accordingly. We aren't afraid of making big changes even in a live game. This is how good MMO endures. You can look at Final Fantasy. Straight up, they had to shut down their game for a year, almost 2 years, to make sure it ended up being the monster powerhouse that it is today. This is kind of him talking about how he's never led a game before. So if you didn't know that, Greg Street has never led a full development of a game before, even though he's probably one of the most accredited at Riot and has been part of multiple title releases? I don't know. I can't talk. I'm sorry. So we are gonna have some rigorous spokesperson model where only a couple of us are empowered to engage with players. We will hear you. Our engineers, artists, producers, writers, audio, VAs, QAs, community, basically anyone who's interested in doing so will have the opportunity to speak about this game. So we're doing a good job. He knows we're doing a good job. He constantly tweets about how he has a great team, and even when there are doubts, they're a team. They're really encouraging to each other. And then at the end of it, he kind of says, so sorry, not sorry about this giant thread, but like basically he doesn't want to have to worry about trying to save the game from a rocky launch. Because, you know, the worst thing you can do about your game is put it out in a poor state. And there's numerous amounts of like examples of games that, you know, were great games that had a rocky start that, you know, no one just doesn't play anymore, and they're going to try to avoid that. So just a little bit of tidbit of Riot MMO news today. I don't do this for every one of his tweet threads, but if there's one that's important, I will definitely cover it. So you know the drill, like and subscribe. Anyone who makes content, you know the drill, like and subscribe to their content as well. And as always, have a great day.